You're listening to the Road to Wisdom podcast, weaving stories told by wonderful minds about all things motherhood, health, intimacy, politics, nature, and everything in between.
Join us on an adventure discovering unique experiences that we can learn from to enhance the ways in which we live.
We are your hosts, Chloe
and Keshia. Welcome everyone to the Road to Wisdom podcast. Today we have my friend and one of my birth photographers, Hayley, in the studio. Today's going to be a big, I think we should probably put a little asterisk on this episode because it is going to be big. We will be talking about Hayley's experience walking her husband, Diego, through palliative care, which was hectic. Yeah. But like I have reached out to you and said, really healing for someone like me who did not realize that that's what it could look like. And you so beautifully shared that on your platform. So can you not cry already? Because I'm going to start crying. Shit, man.
I'll just laugh instead because I'm awkward.
Oh my God, we're already tearing up. So it could get a little emotional. There may be a few F-bombs and yes, pre-warning. But thank you so much for coming in today and for talking about this because it's not an easy topic.
It's not, no.
But yeah, I thought it's definitely really important because I wish 1,000 wishes that I had have seen that and been exposed to that before I had my experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, Hayley.
Yes. Well, I think that's kind of my reason behind sharing it too, was just that I feel like so many people said the same thing. They were just like, I can't believe that this is a thing. How did you do this? how's that even possible? You know, so I think that was my biggest thing around wanting to be so open and public with it all. Yeah. That, and I guess I had built this community online that had followed our journey, and it kind of was like a documentary thing for me as well, I guess, which kind of turned into something for me and I guess something for others to learn.
Yeah. And I think probably the healing power of what you shared would have gone far beyond anything you could probably know.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Well, would you like to start? I guess maybe we'll go, if we can, briefly into the beginning of
the
journey.
Yeah. Like as in the beginning of our cancer journey. Yeah. Well, I think it was about 2018, I think he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, like brain cancer. And we just had our third baby. She was just under 12 months when he was diagnosed. So it kind of came out of the blue for us. It was just like like a normal day. I mean, you look back and you kind of go, oh, I can see all the signs. And he'd kind of put it out there before we'd even known as well. But it was just one of those things, like he was having symptoms and it was just, I think I have a brain tumor. Like, who can I see? And we'd have these conversations and it just kind of always stuck with me that he said that. It's just like this inner knowing, and then like an inner knowing that he kind of knew. And even at work one day when they were talking just something ridiculous, he was like, I'm going to die from a brain tumor. And like within 6 months he was diagnosed of speaking like that. So it was just, that alone is just mind blowing. But really it did still feel like it came out of nowhere, apart from like the few odd symptoms that he had. So yeah, I don't even know where to begin. I think it's just been it was a massive journey. So it was about 3.5 years, I think, of like beginning to like him passing away. And that evolved like so many ups and downs. So, like going into like what they'd call like remission or stable, and then coming back out of it, and all the treatment options and therapies that we were doing in that time period. So I look back now, I think when I was in it, you're just in it. You're full of adrenaline, you're doing everything. Like I was raising the babies. I also had folk in amongst his diagnosis as well, which was very unexpected, but I guess kind of beautiful at the same time. But raising 4 babies, as you girls would know, and then having your partner going through a cancer diagnosis like that and being his person and his carer was hard. And I think, looking back now, I can see the impact that it had on me now. But I think when you're in it, you're just in it. You just
survival.
You just like, I don't know, the adrenaline's going and I don't think it felt as hard when I was doing it, until I crashed. That's when I was like, okay, I can look back now and go, wow, how did I even do half of it? But when you're in it, it's kind of like parenting in general, right? Like you're just doing it every day. So I don't even really know where to begin with.
Well, and I mean, in that too, you guys had to deal with COVID, and I know that
definitely
brought even more challenges to an already ridiculously challenging time.
I think because he was doing quite well, and I think it was around that COVID time where I was heavily pregnant with folk, and that's when basically the whole COVID storm started. And obviously that also throws like your birth plans and everything out the window, and, all of those kinds of things, and getting people like midwives and stuff. And then also his decline happened roughly around that same period. So when I actually had conceived folk, he was doing really well. He'd been stable for a while. Like he was having his regular scans. He was doing like a lot of alternate therapies. He was doing really well. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, one scan showed growth, and they were kind of like giving us that statistic of, he has less than 6 months to live. And I was probably like 2 months out from giving birth to folk, and obviously COVID, and it just threw me in the air because I was like, not only did I have not guilt, but like I knew he had a cancer diagnosis, and brain cancer never has a good prognosis. So I was like, here I am pregnant. So that wasn't guilt, because I would never feel guilt around having him, but it was still that like, what have I done? What have we done? And then when we got that dropped on us, I think it was just huge. And just having COVID around the same time, obviously even extra isolated, and trying to deal with this new prognosis of they're telling us he's got 6 months and I'm about to have my 4th baby. So it was definitely challenging around that COVID time. But we ended up obviously having folk at home and having the birth that we wanted, and he was there for it, and it was a beautiful birth. So, you can kind of see why things come and go when needed. Like it was beautiful. But I think past that we ended up traveling to Sydney for surgery through COVID. Yeah. And folk as a baby. So that was big. Big in itself.
Yeah. And I'm going to name drop, you saw Charlie Tao.
Yes. Yeah. So that's kind of played out in a big part of our journey, I think, because obviously when, at the beginning of a diagnosis, you're kind of just thrown in, you've got this huge tumor, you need an operation. Like you just don't really have that knowledge, or you just don't feel like you have time. You just feel like you're in the system, and this is huge and this is scary, and we need to operate. We're operating tomorrow to get this mass out. And you're just kind of like overwhelmed, and you're like, okay, it's an operation, kind of whatever. And so that was very fast tracked at the beginning, and that was through the system. And we had our ups and downs with that. I learnt quite quickly that I have to pay more attention to it all, I guess. So that was quite big. But yes, come forward a little bit more forward to when he's had growth. The hospital obviously said to us when I was pregnant with folk that, he's got growth. There's nothing we can do. Like we've tried everything. It just is, there's nothing that we can offer him now. And a few people were like, I think it's time you try and see Charlie Tao. Like he has really great success rates. He's just a great human. We'd had a lot of trouble with the system and the surgeons that we'd had prior with Diego, which has just been an added extra stress dealing with it. But after speaking to a few people that have navigated cancer, I think it's quite a common thing to find within the system. Like that's almost like another whole topic in itself of, I guess, the stress and what it's done to all of us. But fast forward to Charlie, we ended up deciding to get a consult with him. So this is in the middle of COVID as well. And obviously Sydney was quite locked down, and I think us up in Queensland were a little bit less. But had a phone consult. He had a look at his scans and so forth. And he was just like, it was a breath of fresh air after dealing with the system and the surgeons and just how they treat you and the lack of respect that they give you. Like I know there was no one that could save him necessarily, but it's like, it's just speak to me like I'm human, and to him like he's human. Like it's a big thing. And I think, I don't know, they just forget, I don't know, you're kind of like a sheep. So with speaking to Charlie, it was so refreshing. He did swear. He was just human. Like he was he was just beautiful. So he just kind of said how it was, like, yes, they're right, this is it. I feel like I can get it out. There are risks. These are the risks, like laid it all out on the table. Also, you're obviously aware, like the financial is there as well. But I think the biggest thing that he cops is his prices. And I would say like 3/4 of it goes to the hospital. It doesn't actually go to Charlie either. So like, Charlie had a $50,000 bill and the hospital had $95,000 for one day. So like there's a big difference. So he's copping all this heat around his prices, but that's a whole nother topic as well. So that was one challenge that we had, which then we had to realize I had to open to crowdfunding to afford this surgery. And also the time was of an essence, like we needed to get this done if we were going to do it. So we crowdfunded and obviously ended up getting down to Sydney wasn't easy, like trying to get permission and all of the things and having 4 kids and we don't have any family either. So like his family are all in Argentina and I just had my mum who lived somewhat close. It wasn't the best form of support, but it was kind of the only support we had. So we decided she'd watch the 2 older girls and I'd take the 2 little ones with me to Sydney. So off we went to Charlie for the surgery. So I'm still like, even though obviously Diego's passed on the other side of it, I'm still forever grateful, even just for the experience within the cancer diagnosis, to have someone that's so humble and pushing for the people, I think. Because, I mean, we all know that there's risks involved and he lets you know. So, like, he's not God either, Mm-hmm. But it's just knowing you have an option. Yeah. That it's not just like we're just going to wipe our hands with you and be done. So, yeah, I feel like we got maybe another 12 months maybe out of after Charlie. But what came from having surgery with Charlie was just huge. So we were always meant to have 3 monthly checks up here back up in Queensland, and the hospital kind of told us that that's what would keep happening. The oncologist is like, you want to go to Charlie. Like they were off it. They were not recommending it one bit, but they were like, you've got nothing left. That's your prerogative. If you want to go there, go there. So we decided to. And
you just like, if you don't want to just give up like we have, fine, go.
Yeah, pretty much. But like you're crazy. Like you're actually looked at like you're actually insane. And we
had 0 other options. You've given us nothing and you think we're not going to take.
Exactly. I have 4 little babies. Like of course I'm going to try like whatever I can. But I think their look was also like all these people are crowdfunding. So they just kind of emphasize on he's rorting people and the money and the system and giving false hope. But I think when you have babies, and especially because I had just given birth, any amount of time is like special. Yes, it's a lot of money, but I don't know. Like, and it sounds really stupid for me to say that I don't care about money because I didn't physically pay. I guess I crowdfunded it, but it's never been at the top of our list. Like I think just time, like they're little, 1 more year to a 3-year-old is everything. Yeah. Or, like 5-year-old, they might not remember pre-5, but they might remember that last year. Like it's a lot. So I think
there are still like formal memories that are being created.
Exactly.
Years,
and I did go through stages where I was like, no, I can't do this. Like it was very hard for me to ask for help. It was very hard for me to reach out and even crowdfund, like that whole like, I can't do this. This is people's money. Like, like my brain it was full on, but I just kind of had to let go. And I guess his life was just so important. I was like, what have I got to lose? I have to try. And, it had been such a journey to get to where we were, and the system had just absolutely broken me. Like that would be just another whole subject on how we were treated through them, because like me and Diego are both very quiet, soft-spoken, didn't challenge them, even though we had different views, like when it comes to treatment and you get frowned upon over vitamin C. Like that's how ridiculous it is. So like to them, we probably were these crazy people, and we're not, I don't even believe that we're that far onto that side, but just the way that you treated and looked at. But yeah, we were really quiet. We weren't challenging. We weren't rude, quite submissive if anything. But yeah, the way we were treated was quite poorly. But I think where that all come to light is after we had surgery with Charlie and we came back up, we were meant to get 3 monthly scans. They refused care. So like we got back and they wouldn't see him. They wouldn't speak to him. They wouldn't see us. They were like, you've gone there, you're not welcome here. And it's a public system. Like it's just, it kind of blew my mind. But I think at the beginning of it, I had hope because Charlie did get all of visually the whole tumour out that they said they couldn't. He was left with Like, obviously you can go, like, you can get paralyzed down one side, vision, speech, those kinds of things were spoken about. And I guess one that I took really lightly, because, obviously I was like, you lose your one side, whatever, we can deal with this, But one thing I took really lightly was the mental side of it. So like his being, his essence. And I'd say that's the one thing that it took. So like he woke up never to be the same again. Like he was there, he could walk, he could talk, he looked the same somewhat. But like his true inner essence of who he was gone. He was very blank. And obviously at the beginning, they tell you that can come back and the brain does magical things and it's always evolving and changing and growing. And so like I think at the beginning I was just holding on to hope. But he kind of woke up on that surgery and kind of didn't even know who I was to a degree. Like he just picked up his phone, went onto Instagram, which he's not even a social media person, and started scrolling through my page and zooming into photos of me and the kids. And I'm standing right beside him and I'm just like, what's going on? Like I'm right here. Hello. And he just like would just look at me like empty. And I think that's when I just shattered, and in comes Charlie, like as a checkup when he's back on the ward, and he's just like, how is he? And I'm like, he won't speak to me. He won't look at me. And he's like, Diego, like that's your wife. Turn around and say hello to your wife. And he's just like, hi. Like as if I was like a stranger. Like it's almost like he was internally trying to figure out who I was. So that was really hard. Like I burst into tears, but obviously got told that, we can't tell what's for a forever thing. And this is now like a brain injury. Yes, the surgery went well, but it's just, it affects certain neurons and they can rebuild and, we can work on it and so forth. So I guess I just had hope. But the big thing is we got the tumor out. So it's gone. Obviously get told the same thing. They kind of give you an analogy like paint in a bucket. Like you can take out as much paint as you want, but it's still kind of there. And that's kind of, I think, why brain cancer has the statistics that it does, is it is actually really hard to get the whole thing out. You're not just necessarily removing a tumor. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the big thing. But yeah, coming back and them not giving us scans was a big shock, but also knowing that his tumor was out, I guess I wasn't too scared at that point. I just kind of like trusted that we'd gone down that route. He's here. I was just trying to be grateful for where we were at. Yeah. And I still just had a baby, a toddler, and then the other two. So like life was busy and hectic, and just trying to keep him healthy, supplemented, still on treatment, like alternate treatments to keep him, like healing, all of those things going forward. But yeah, fast forward, he really did not get better in that aspect of his essence. Like I just feel like that was gone, that was lost. So that was a big challenge, and a challenge for the kids because, like he came back a different person, like you parent a certain way, and then he's just a lot more angry, a lot more short-tempered, a lot more like he lost all empathy. Like empathy was gone. Like he didn't even have it anymore. And he was so empathetic before. Like it was just who he was. He was very touching, very loving, very kind, very gentle. To like, when you're a parent and you kind of feed your kids first and then you eat second, he would like eat off their plates and like just really random things, but things that the kids would notice, like mom, dad's eating my food. Almost like he was like childlike a little bit in the brain again, but yeah, he just looked so normal. So like those things stayed, but I guess we still just remain grateful that we had time with him because there was still a part of him there, but it's just there was these other parts that was like learning who he is again. And I guess no one ever really tells you about it or about brain injuries and, where you're at and all of these things. So we did have a big journey along that year of his behavior and how it would affect the kids, and his language started to get really bad towards the kids and his aggression started to get really bad towards the kids. And that's when I I don't know, like I guess my instincts started to like flare up, and I was like, it's almost like he's getting worse, And then he sort of declined a little bit there for a while, and I knew something was wrong. He knew something was wrong. The seizures came back. So I was like, if they've got the cancer out, why are we going backwards? It's kind of like your red flags just come again. And so I'm calling the hospital, and you get a cancer nurse and you have all these things. Long story short, they didn't care. I'd call them and they're like, it's just, who knows? You had surgery with Charlie. Anything could be wrong. And I'm like, can you please see him? He's due for a scan. No, we can't. They couldn't even really give me an answer. It's not like they were necessarily over the phone saying, because you went with Charlie, but it was like very obvious the way they were doing it, you know, like they were just avoiding. So like he'd ended up having like one morning just having a seizure and falling on the floor, and I could barely pick him up, and I'm calling them again, and I'm just like, he's on the floor, he's deteriorating, he's almost like going into full dementia. And they were like, no, like it could just be a side effect of surgery. At this point, he was probably like 10 months out from surgery. So it's like, this isn't just post-surgery. Like, I'm not stupid. So like I can see a change in him. He's really unwell. Anyways, he had another one. I'm like, I'm calling the ambulance. Like, he's going back in. And they took him in, and obviously it was during COVID. So like I couldn't get in, even though I was his carer, and even though like because he had this brain injury, they're not quite like he's not at capacity to fully be there himself. Like he needed to have someone there with him, but they wouldn't let me in. They wouldn't call. Like they were just treating us like we were like the enemy. It was really bizarre. But I did get a phone call in the end. They'd done a scan and he had a brain bleed. So they were just like, they just give you minimal information. They're just like, he's had a brain bleed. He's going to have to go in for surgery tomorrow. I was like, so can I come in? And they were like, you know, trying to do all their checks. I'll call you back to see if I can get you in. I'm like, this is brain surgery. Like I'm going to get in there. Like I fought hard every time to be there for him, and they wouldn't let the babies in. Obviously I was breastfeeding a baby too. So like they wouldn't let the baby in. I'm like, I'm breastfeeding. So it was just that fight to get in there. Long story short, I got in there. They, the surgeon that had originally done his surgery was our surgeon, and my heart just sunk because he was just so cruel and not a nice man at all. And it's funny because I ran into a GP in our local area, and I told him that I'd had trouble with this surgeon, and he named the surgeon, and he's like, don't take it personally. It's just who he is. His bedside manner is just horrendous. You're not the only one. And I'm like, it kind of makes you feel better, but it also is just not okay. Like you're a young family navigating this, and you're just being treated like you're an animal when you're trying your best. So we had him again, and I just remember going in, and he's like, he's had a brain, like really short with me. He's had a brain bleed. He was unconscious at this point, and he had messed the whole bed when I'd got there. No one had cared for him. So he was basically laying in his own like mess. And I just remember like falling to the floor. He was like unconscious, barely awake. And I remember going out to the nurse, just like, he's messed himself. Can I clean it? Like, and I went into like, they have like their own little private toilet. It's just everywhere. And I'm just like, how long has he been sitting in this mess? Like, I haven't been allowed in here, and you've just left him like this. But I was still polite to them. Like, I didn't even speak to them like that. I was just like, what can I do? I'll be in there soon. Just really short and really rude. And at that point I was a mess. I think this is like around roughly when I mentally broke. But he just come in and just said, you know, he's had a brain bleed. He's having surgery, and I just looked at him and I just said, what does that surgery entail? Is this like another whole craniotomy where they're going to like do the same kind of massive surgery, or is it like smaller surgery? It's a brain bleed. And he just turned around and said, it is what it is. Here's a consent form, and threw it at me and stormed out. And had, you know, they kind of have like a little, I call them like a minion now, but it's like their little person that they have with them. Like, I don't know whether because it's a university hospital, I don't know. But he just threw the paperwork at me. It went all over the floor. Diego was out to it. And he goes, you have to sign the consent form, because obviously he couldn't. And he goes to his like, whatever, colleague, get her to sign it, and walked out. And that was it. Like, I was like petrified. I was like, why has he had a brain bleed? No one could tell me. Like, what I wanted to know was like, is this common? Like, where would this have come from? Like, I didn't know to look out for this. And I signed the consent form because I was petrified. I could see that he wasn't going to survive. For me, it felt like he wasn't going to survive a day. So like, I'd signed it, and then I called my GP. So I'd had this one GP, female GP, that she was there for my home births for my baby. So even though we weren't technically on the same page, she was very open to it all. So she was with us through the births of our babies, and she was with me through the stuff with Diego, and she was the only saving grace, I think, that I had the whole time, because she was always on our side as like a human, you know, like to be treated right. So yeah, so I gave her a call, and I just remember driving home from the hospital because I had to go back to feed Folk, and I told her, because it was so fresh, I told her what he'd said word by word, and that he'd literally thrown these papers at me. And I think this might sound crazy, but I just remember bawling my eyes out on the phone to her, saying they're going to kill him. Like, they're actually going to kill him. I don't have any trust. Like, I feel like they hate us and I don't know what we've done wrong. And she's like, you haven't done anything wrong and I'm so sorry you've been treated like this and this is appalling, but it's not the time to fight right now. The time is he needs that surgery. Like, you don't have to consent also. She said you actually haven't really given consent. If they haven't told you what can happen and what, you know, like all the pros and cons, that's really not even a consent. She's like, you can say no, but at this point it's probably safest to just let him have the surgery. And she's like, I can laugh about it now, even though it still hurts. It's like he can't kill him. There's more people in that operating theatre than just him. And I know it sounds really crazy, but that's kind of where it got to. I just couldn't fathom the way he was treated and neglected. I was just like, and knowing that we'd been to Charlie. So, you know, like they have teams, like when you're in hospital, they have teams that come around when they have changeovers and they kind of explain who everybody is. They would come around and they'd be like, this is Diego. He's here for this. He had surgery with Charlie Tao. And then they'd all sit in a corner and like chat. And it was like so obvious. It was just like, and I'm like, at this point, as I said, his surgery was like 10 months ago, you know, but it was like they were blaming his brain bleed on Charlie. And I was just like, I just can't fathom it. Like, it's been so long, you know.
That is wild. Like, why do they have such a vendetta? Is it because it's just like ego? They're like, oh, because like everyone knows that he is expensive but has a really good success rate.
He does. He's helped so many children. I think it's obviously like it's my husband and it's people of all ages, but he's like saved children's lives. I just don't get it. And obviously he hasn't saved everybody, and everybody's like, well, I paid you $150,000 and they died, or they're a vegetable, or but like that's the risk you take as a person. You choose to pay, you choose the risk.
Like suddenly the negative side effects aren't appropriate. Like, yeah. It's not a thing.
But I think because he just goes like supposedly, I heard like the neurosurgery team, if one says they can't operate and it's inoperable, they all have to follow. So like we tried, before going to Charlie, we actually tried to get a private oncologist up here in Brisbane, a woman, and we wrote to her, and even my GP wrote to her and just said they just want a second opinion. Like we'd never even seeked a second opinion before. We were like, we just want a second opinion. She wrote back and she even called my GP and she just said, I can't step on anyone's toes. I can't even look at his scans because someone said it's inoperable. So because Charlie's like, I'll do it, they all hate him. They're just like, he's reckless, his language is inappropriate. He takes people's money and gives people false hope.
It's like, but what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what are you doing?
And the long-term trauma from like, I can see it on the other side now. I can see what it's done to me. But like, even I guess Diego being treated like that for so long, like that's awful, you know, like it's like.
It's not conducive to healing.
I'm not this crazy person that expects a miracle or someone to save his life. It's just like, just being treated like a human.
Can you do your best and then
care,
also
show that you care?
I can definitely relate to that experience in hospital where the staff are just shut down around you. It's like, and I, you know, in my rage post my dad passing, I would be like they're all sociopaths and blah, blah, blah. And then when I was in a better frame of mind, it's like, well, I think they need to be sociopaths.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
And they've been trained to be completely disconnected from human emotion, because what kind of person with any kind of empathy can actually cut into another human and perform surgeries on vital organs, you know?
Day in, day out.
Yeah. And how many people are they actually responsible for killing? And like, what does that do to your soul? So it's almost like they have to be like these demented assholes to continue on. But maybe you've got like a lifetime. I guess at some stage you have to turn around and be like, okay, I'm this much of this job has turned me into this much of a freak. I got to stop now.
Definitely
become a human again. So
because there's cold and then there's like cruel.
Yeah.
And I felt it was very cruel. And I know that we were judged at the beginning, and it sounds really dumb, but it was like when he was ever first had his seizure, going back to that, they were adamant that he was overdosing. And he was with the kids about to get them in the car. I was coming back from a birth. He's barely drinks alcohol. Like, he doesn't even have a beer. Like, he was a tattooist. So like, I'd hate to even jump to those kind of conclusions and put yourself in that box, but it just blew my mind the judgment. Even the GP in the end, she's like, I'm really, like she's appalled as a GP that she witnessed it, and she's just like, I think you just were subjected to some really bad judgment. And because she knew us quite well, she knew how kind-hearted he was. And, you know, like, and I understand it. Like, he was coming in with this major seizure and, you know, frothing at the mouth and all of these things. But it's still so cruel to judge, you know. Yeah. But you'd think even after a while they'd see, I mean, do a blood test if you really think that. Like, come on, guys. Like, he still needs care. He's a human. So, yeah, it was huge. And just the fact that the system had then wiped us after he'd seen Charlie was hard. So he ended up having that brain bleed rectified, and the treatment in there was pretty much like we were nothing. They'd come in, they'd barely speak to us. I could barely get any information. Like, is this something I should look out for? Like, what is this? What could have caused it? Oh, it could have been a knock, could have fell, could have hit his head. I think might have been a nurse said to us, like, once you'd taken and removed, because his whole right lobe was gone at this point. So like they're like, once you remove so much of the brain, it can move about a lot easier. So the smallest of knocks could burst a blood vessel, like quite easy, opposed to like us with your full healthy brain there. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Didn't really remember him knocking himself, but hey, it could have been something so silly with the kids even. So that was rectified, and we kind of just went along, and I just started to notice subtle changes in his behavior and just his being. And it's like this, and this is probably going to sound really crazy to most too, but I think they got a point where he was having a shower and I could just see that he was going downhill, not like eating, sleeping more was a big one. And I was just like, just signs of like when I knew that his tumor was growing, like when we got told his tumor was growing in the past, those signs were coming back, like the sleeping all day, not having energy, all of these things. So I just remember he was in the shower one night, and I just looked at him from behind, and I just had this feeling, and I'm just like, the cancer is back and it's down his spine. And it was just this inner knowing, and I didn't say anything to him then on the spot, but his back just looked different to me. And like the tops of like, I guess his bum, like his coccyx area just looked really different to me. And I'm like, it almost looked like he'd been doing heaps of workouts. And I was like, I even had this joke of like, your bum's getting big. Like, it was like, what's going on? And because he was different, he was quite a funny, sarcastic kind of person. And now when I cracked a joke, something similar like that, he'd actually take it seriously. So he'd be like, what do you mean? That's really mean. Like, and I was just like, it's just learning how to navigate that again. But we had that back and forth, and it stuck with me. So obviously we went back to the hospital, and I just said, can we please get a scan? This isn't looking right. He's having these symptoms. This area just does not look right to me or normal. I don't know if it's just because he's eating more, because obviously when he came out of surgery, he would just eat. Like, he just wasn't himself. He'd like, was a kid. He'd just eat your house out for days. So I was just like, maybe he's just put on a bit of weight. And long story short, they were like, no, went to our GP. And I just said, you know, these are what I'm concerned. The hospital are not seeing him. And obviously she kind of stuck up for them in a way of like, well, it's COVID. We can't get everyone in. So they might have just put him to the bottom. Yes, maybe because you've gone to Sydney. So she's like, we'll do a CT scan just to keep your mind at ease. And we ended up having 2 CT scans, and it didn't show much. So we were like, okay. I was like, my heart was still like, we need this MRI. At this point, it'd been like 9 months since he'd been checked, and it was meant to be checked every 3. So I was just like, my gut was just like, get this scan. And he was deteriorating. He could see it. And I just said to him, and when I called the oncologist and the cancer nurse, I just said, I have a feeling this has gone down his spine. He's having tingling down the right of his legs. His feet are going numb. They're like, oh, no, that could happen from the surgery. Same thing. It was always just reverted back to Charlie. And I just said, no, this is new. At this point, we're like looking at nearly 12 months post Charlie. Like, come on, I'm not stupid. And they kept saying no, and they said to me, like, obviously started to think I was a hypochondriac. They said, like, Hayley, his type of cancer cannot go to the spine. It just doesn't. It's not even possible. So it kind of put my mind at ease, but my gut was like, nah. And then I was on PubMed, and I'd come across 2 studies where his cancer had gone to the spine, his type of cancer. And I remember laying in bed and looking at Diego and going, look what I've just found. Like, my heart sunk. And I just remember looking at him, and he just cried. He's like he just bawled. It's almost like we both kind of knew. So I called them again, and I just said, look what I've found, these articles. Like, I'm really concerned. Can we please scan him? They were like, nope, wouldn't scan him. I'm like, I'm going to call Charlie and try and get a scan from him. And I called Charlie, he booked a scan up here in Queensland, and he would read it. He called me the following day, and he just said, are you sitting down? I was like, yeah. He's just like, it's all around his brain, down his spine and into his like coccyx, like tailbone. And I was just like, I think what I said was just like, I knew it. And then I just crumbled. I was like, how am I going to tell him this? And like, where do we go to from here? Like, I kind of knew it, so it wasn't a huge shock, but I was just like, how did I know it? And your intuition and your gut is just so strong. And
you're still just hoping for someone to prove you wrong too.
Yeah,
like you
I
just
think
want
so.
them to turn around and be like, no, it is all in your head. Like,
yeah. And I just remember saying to him, they won't see us. They won't scan him. They won't do anything. Like, I don't know where to go from here. And he just said, look, it's bad. It's really bad. Like, more or less, there's no real coming back from here now. It's everywhere. And that would explain his symptoms and the way he's acting. And so he found a private oncologist for us to see up on the Gold Coast. That was kind of, I guess, Charlie friendly, you would say. And all of this obviously comes at a cost. So that was another hard thing. Like, to see a private oncologist is a lot. Like, obviously when you're in the system, you're not really paying for these scans and these other things. But obviously once you're out, you got to pay for it all. So like, as sad as it is, it's like money was always coming into play, because it's like, we need all of this and we need all these appointments and we need all these scans. But financially, it was just really hard. But we pushed through. You just make it do with what you can. So he did see the private oncologist, and there really wasn't much. They were like, we can trial this chemo to try and stop the spread. So like, stop it from going so fast, because it's like the impact that the cancer was doing to him was quite cruel. Like, it was pain. It was like incontinence, numbness in the legs, falling over. So it was quite a lot. Blurry vision. His speech was going really fast. This was all happening in like a week. Like, we're talking now, it's like rapid speed, his decline. So I think at that point, it was like, what do you want to do? Like, I kind of handed it over to him. Like, I'd been pushing so long, but he wasn't really coherent enough. And I was just like, do we try this chemo to slow this thing down? Like, it's not a cure. It's not going to fix him. It's not going to save his life, but it might just make his symptoms gentler on his system. And I remember saying, we all know that chemo can also ruin quality of life, but they were like, at this point, Hayley, his quality of life is horrendous. So it might actually be the opposite. So we said yes, and he started on a few rounds, and it did. They were like, pretty much, this is either going to make or break. And I guess at the speed it was going, it did slow it down. Not a crazy amount, but it did. And they did a couple of scans, but obviously it was still just progressing, and he just kind of progressed from there, which kind of went really fast. So we had this long healing of like ups and downs, and then I feel like it's just like a big slap in the face, bang. It was all downhill and quite fast from there. So that's when I was like, wow, what do I do? Like, you don't really think of death in all of this. Like, they never sit you down. They never tell you anything. They don't tell you about the disease. They don't tell you about prognosis. There's nothing formal. I think people think when you get cancer and have a young family, they sit you in a nice little room and explain things like they do on TV. They don't. Like, it's just, it's cold. You don't know. You're winging it. So like, I think I didn't have the time to think about death and what I would do around death. And I didn't have any friends or family around us. It was me, him and the kids. So we'd spent, our time in the car and traveling to treatments and therapies, like alternate therapies and treatments that he was having done. So yeah, now it was like, I need to think. Like, I just had this knowing, he's dying. Like, I can see it. It's happening fast and he's going. Where to from here? Like, what do I even do? I haven't even been to many funerals in my life. Like, absolutely had no idea. All I knew in my gut was that I didn't want someone to come and take him in a body bag in front of my kids the minute he dies and wheel him off. Like, that's all I knew I didn't want. I didn't want a company, which they're all funeral directors are in it for the money. I just didn't want it. That's all I knew. But I was like, what other options do I have?
Yeah.
So I guess I just started there with that whole death.
Yeah. And so you've come to this like horrendous place of basically needing to accept that this was the future after years of just like, no, it's life.
Yeah.
And then, like from what I saw and what many people would have seen on socials, you set up your house as this sanctuary and like reverent space for what is, and never treated like it's an incredible spiritual event. And I often like I often will compare death and birth together because I lived the two in the day. But it was like you created this. Yeah. Anyway, I'd love to go into it, like, so where you found your information for that, or if that just all came from.
I don't even know. I think what I realized I needed was support. I think that's where it started. I was like, okay, what's palliative care going to look like? Like, I know that's a thing. No one even speaks to you about it, but they were like, you're pretty much going to go into palliative. You've got a few options. We lived in Bow Desert, so we were about an hour away from any form of palliative care. So I was like, I've got 4 little kids. I don't have anyone to come watch them for palliative care. Like what? Like my brain was just, and I think if I go back a little bit, maybe like a month. So after, we found out that it had all come back. Actually, before it all come back, the brain bleed, when they threw the paperwork at me, I'd got sick. Who knows if it was with COVID at that point? I had no idea. But I went downhill fast. Like I got the worst vertigo. I couldn't get out of bed. I had head pressure. I couldn't walk. And all I knew that he needed was me. And I was so angry at myself because I was like, I'd survived 3 years of this with the kids. Why am I breaking now? But it's like, if I look back at myself, I'm like, one, they broke me. Like I just had no fight left. There was nothing I could do to make them see that we are human and he needs care. Like I just really felt broken. And I think now that I look back from the outside, I think they literally did break me. Like it's like my nervous system or whatever it was, because I went down. I couldn't walk. I had the worst brain fog I've ever had in my life. I could barely make a phone call. And that's when I had to call my mum in to kind of come and take him to, like, I'd call and make appointments and she'd have to drive him. At this point, he's getting in a wheelchair and all of the things, and all the equipment had to come fast. So like slings to get him off the bed, changing like pads and incontinence aids, showering, toilets, all of these things. And my body just wasn't working. And I obviously then really fast was trying to get appointments for me to try and figure out what was going on. At this point I had doctors saying it's long COVID, it's this, it's that. And at the end of the day, who knows what it was? Was it a combo of everything? But I feel like I had just broken, and then coming into he's dying and I feel like I'm dying inside, like it was just so challenging. But so what I knew I needed was support. So I had lost all friends that I had known. So I literally there was not a soul that I knew that could help. So I had the kids. I could barely get out of bed and he was dying. And I knew that I still don't necessarily think I was looking at like pre-death or funeral care. I was like, he's going to die. What am I going to survive this? Like what am I going to do with myself? Am I going to be able to get up? So my first line of looking was, and I was like, death doula, I think I researched. And I was like, just trying to find someone that could be there that I could pay to support me through this part of the journey. And I think only 2 people come up around this area. And I had Hayley from Paperbark, who's from this like Northern Rivers area. And then there was somebody else, I can't even think of her name now, up Queensland way, but she didn't do kind of a bit of everything. It was just kind of one thing. So long story short, I'd reached out to Hayley, and I think I put a post on Instagram also reaching out to the community, like, does anyone know of any kind of death doula or whatever? I don't really like the word doula, but, just death support maybe is the better word. And Hayley was recommended. So she came out to meet me. She said, she was probably 2.5 hours from me. So I thought, gosh, I'm too far. And she's like, no, I'll come and meet you and the family. So I remember she came out one night, and Diego was there and he was declining, and she witnessed just the way he was treating the kids and the aggression that he was getting. And, like Luna, I think she would have been 8, so she was our eldest. And I just remember they were always fighting, and he was just like, she'd come up to give him a hug and he'd just tell her to fuck off, like fuck off and get out of my face. And she'd just be like, I'm your daughter, Dad. Like, you're my dad. Don't, like, why are you talking to me like this? Just fuck off. Like, he just would scream in their faces, and they just didn't understand. So they would have this war. And I remember Hayley being there, and she was obviously witnessing how aggressive he can be. And I don't think it was necessarily her that told me, but someone through palliative also said that with brain cancer, they can actually become quite physically violent too, and that you have to be careful. And like, obviously it's just me and the kids. So I was like, obviously I was thinking of the original Diego, and I'm like, I'm safe as anything. He's the one man in my life that's made me feel safe, if anything. And yes, it's stuck in my head just to be cautious, but also like the verbal abuse is almost just as toxic, as I can see playing out afterwards. But Hayley was there and she kind of saw how bad things were getting, and she kind of knew that it's coming to time and you're going to need somebody. And I think she too was quite shocked that it was just me and the kids. She just couldn't fathom that I had no other support. So I think it really pulled on her, and she kind of reached out to me and she said, I'll help work with maybe NDIS and try and get as much support from her that she could, so that she could come up and kind of be that pre-support for me, almost like under like a support worker, I guess you'd say, so that would help my financial strain too, because my main purpose was like, okay, he's going to die. I need aftercare. Like I can swing this to he passes, but I don't know, how am I going to get out of bed the next morning, you know? So like my emphasis to her was like, I'll pay, like whatever I have to do, I need support. And I can't keep going the way I'm going. So she did the whole support thing through NDIS for a couple of weeks. So she'd come out, I think maybe it worked out being once or twice a week, and she'd stay the night and she'd just like be there for the kids, be there for me, kind of like a friend almost she felt at the beginning too, you know, like, which was kind of really refreshing, because it was like, oh my God, I actually have someone to talk to. Like it's going to make me emotional, but it's just like, it's such an isolating, scary journey to do on your own. Like, and then to have someone just kind of come out of nowhere, like a fairy godmother, and just like hug your kids and, you know, love on them when their dad is dying and like abusing us all. It's just like, I'll always be grateful for that. But yeah, I think that's where the whole funeral thing came about. And that's where like me sharing what I wanted to do with him, and the fact that we have no one. So to have a funeral, I had who would come. There was no one left, you know, like cancer, I think, I don't know, it just pushes everybody away, and I'll never fully understand it, but I get it too at the same time. Like it's a hard thing. And I think everyone maybe thought that I had support. So then everyone's thinking you have support. And on social media, because I use social media as like a diary, I guess you would say, and like people would comment. I know a lot of people were like, crap, she's supported. There might be 100 comments on there. That 100 comments didn't translate to one phone call. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I think there was just that deceiving moment, but just getting chatted with Hayley about what's next, like what's this funeral going to look like? Okay, he's going to pass, and then what do I do? What are my options? And I just remember her telling me, I told her what I envisioned, which was just like, it's just us. You know, I don't want to be paying tens of thousands of dollars when I don't have anyone to come. And it's not big for us, like a big fancy funeral, you know. And she just described some of the things that she'd done in the past. And obviously burial, like home burial is not a thing because we were renting. But she mentioned that we could keep him home for up to 4 days on like a cooling plate and do like a home vigil, which is just, you know, like what we did, which was just decorate it how you want, whatever spiritual practice or not spiritual practice, whatever you wanted to do at home, you could do.
Yeah.
And that we spoke together about how important it was for my kids. And I think the palliative care team came out to me a few times and they were kind of a bit shocked. I think most people are just like, you're going to traumatize your kids. You know, I'm like, the kids have been here through it all. They haven't gone anywhere. They've witnessed every seizure. They've witnessed absolutely everything. To me and my gut just felt like the most natural thing for them is to see it. What felt unnatural for me is that I didn't even realize until we started to speak about it is like if someone passes, you call an ambulance or whatever, and then they come and they basically bag them and take them out straight away. It's like a hush, hush, hide, like that didn't feel natural for me. Those kids, it's like a birth, you know, like I really do think it's just the same, like, and it should be celebrated in the same way. Or just not even celebrated. I don't know what the word is, but just given, like
that space needs
I
to be
think
held.
so. I really think
honored.
so. I think so. And we're meant to do it. We're not meant to do it alone. Death and birth is not meant to be done alone. You know, like I think that's a big one. But because it's not spoken about and it's just what you do and it's just no one questions it because no one talks about it. So that just horrified me. I was like, there's no way that my kids are going to be asleep and their dad's going to be whisked off. And if they witness that, that's horrific. And if they don't witness it, how do they take it in their little brains that their dad's just gone? Like you can say the word dead, but they're children. So like that was really big, and I was just really open with them the whole time. So she mentioned that and I was like, that feels the most aligned to me, like to just keep him at home and just have the kids as evolved as they can. And yeah, so that's kind of was what we had planned, I guess, between me and her. So she could hold that space. She could do the cooling plate, navigate, I guess, the paperwork side of that, and which helped tremendously, obviously. But also, I guess, because of my situation, she was also there for a small part of the pre-death as well, which I don't think she normally does, but I think it was just situational in our place that I think she just knew that we were desperate for some form of help, you know, because I think palliative care to me were just like, you can't do this. There's no way you can do palliative care on your own with 4 kids and you're still breastfeeding. And we all were co-sleeping, like, and I was like, what's my other option? I'm on my own. I'm not going to drive an hour and miss his death or miss the way he's also treated. Mind you, I was scarred from the way we were treated. Why would I leave him in the hands of a hospital? Like I'm not saying everyone gets treated poorly in palliative care. That would be a horrible thing to say or even think. But I think in our little world,
in my experience,
you hear it.
But I couldn't say any different. Like what my dad, the treatment my dad received and the treatment that we all received was just, it was appalling. It was really disgusting.
I don't think I've ever heard of a good story either. Even like my elderly family members, I'm pretty sure they just got hooked up to morphine and then
it's like a waiting room.
Yeah, but it's actually interesting because I followed your journey at the start through the whole thing as well. And I remember thinking, I actually thought it was like illegal to do what you were doing. I was like, surely is that even legal? Because I feel like it's such unknown charted waters and no one experiences it in a way. It's just classic, like you just go to the hospital and go and get in an ambulance and then you go off and then you whatever they do. And that's all we've ever known. And it's much like this unbreaking out of like the birth system as well. It's the same thing.
So
We've always just thought, oh, well, we just go to the hospital when you're in labour and you have a baby in the hospital and then whatever you get, you get.
And it's either dangerous or it's like you shouldn't do that, or you're a rebel, or you're going against the grain, or
it just feels like we're reclaiming something for ourselves, reclaiming what is actually natural and for us, not for the powers that be.
It's really your intuition, isn't it? I don't know, like it's the same with birth. I don't know. I always question that. I always question, why do we not rebel, but like reclaim, like what is in us that makes us go, hold on, this doesn't sit right, you know, like it's got to be another way.
And it's so, I think because I've drawn just so many similarities between how birth is treated in a hospital and how death is treated in the hospital. And I mean, we as women get multiple chances at birth.
Yeah.
You fuck it up the first time.
Exactly.
And you know, like you don't again.
Or you want to do it again and you want to change it.
Exactly. And you get that healing experience. But when it comes to death, you don't. Like if you fuck it up the first time, it's fucked. Like you just, And
the trauma that's left behind, like it's already, grief is already big, let alone all of the ifs and buts, and how you were treated, I think has got to be the biggest thing in it all.
Which is exactly like birth. Like
100%.
We are seeing that so much now. Like the inquiries for trauma against women in birth is huge.
Yeah.
And it like
exactly the same.
Exactly the same. And when I watched what happened to my dad, like I could imagine being a you know, the partner of a woman in a bed, having drugs forced into her, being told to be quiet, being like having things to try and speed up the process. Yeah. Which was all just exactly that. Like I was in there pregnant, like, oh my God, like this is just,
it's sick.
It's sick. And when you look at it, when I saw that, I was like, it's not just birth. Like we're so, you know, we've got so many avenues now for support to get out of the system for birth. Yeah. But there's nothing
for death. And we're all going to die. And like we're all need it.
And we're all going to experience loved ones dying. And to not, you know, to see it like the way it happened in my situation, I was just like, everyone needs to know that it shouldn't be like this.
Yeah.
And it wasn't fair. I'm like, surely if there are natural processes for birth that help with the pain and help, like your body is producing whatever chemicals it needs to produce to get you through a birth, like surely the body has that to get you through a death as well.
Yeah.
And and I'm like, that got taken away from my dad. Like they numbed him out. They stopped his body from doing the things that it was probably meant to do and just shoved so much morphine into him that his body started shutting down.
Yeah.
And I was like you ruined the last thing he was ever going to do on earth. And then and that was my experience anyway. But then when it
just makes me so emotional because you think of their souls, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the last moment they have.
Yeah.
Like I just think it shouldn't be taken so lightly.
No. And like to see that Diego was surrounded by his family, that you guys were like a unit the whole time. And I don't want to take away from the heartache and grief and like how still traumatic it would have been. But for him, like that's got to be like, I feel like in those last moments, you know, he would have switched back to him.
Yeah.
And like he would have felt that.
He did come back. It's crazy actually.
Yeah.
Like he really did have a moment of coming back to himself. And I think those are some of the most heartbreaking memories, I think, for me and the kids, but beautiful at the same time for him. Like I think that was like, I don't know, like you just, when it's your partner or your kid, I can imagine, you just want the best for them. You just want them to feel safe and to feel loved. Like if I was dying, I just want someone to lay there with me, you know, like, and I think when you're put into palliative care, you're in a room and they don't check on you. Like you're right. You get a driver full of morphine. It's the same thing for everybody. It's like after all this time and how many people are dying, haven't they found a safer, more beautiful way to die?
And because the patient can't complain too. Like that was
Let's not forget the money. Like it's just
and they need more beds. So like, that was one of the things that got me because I remember things happening to my dad and I'm like, why aren't you checking on this? Like, why aren't you doing this? And I was just the crazy pregnant lady. Yeah. And I was just like, you've got a fucking job.
Yes.
You're being paid for this.
It's a hard one, but you signed up for it.
Yeah. And just do it. Right. Yeah. And it's like, why? So, you know, he can't complain about it in like 2 days, 3 days, a week's time.
But the family is left though. Yeah. Like you're left, if you find it or you see it, like you're left. Like I'm appalled at so if I didn't, like a lot of people like that's crazy that you did what you did, some people. And it's like, if I didn't have that, my only other option was palliative care rural, which I still got assigned to, which was like, I met these 2 nurses once and it was like, this is what's happening. He looks like he's going to pass. You're going to get a lockbox. You're going to get medication. It has to be up because these are like, it was morphine and everything like that. And you'll get a nurse half an hour a day that's going to come and check on him now that he's palliative. So that was basically all the info I got. Also along the lines of, you're crazy, you're not going to do this. So I also had NDIS. So that was a really hard thing to navigate for myself on my own. So much paperwork and the background and who you can get. And also I think being rural didn't help me. The fact that care and support workers and incontinence aids and equipment wasn't local. It was really hard to get and we needed it fast. But back to the palliative care thing, I think you kind of left. So then we get a nurse that comes once a day and at the beginning this only lasted probably 2 weeks from like start to his death. But Hayley was still there from Paper Bark as well on the side. So like obviously I still had her as somewhat of a support around death because that's what she deals with. But they'd come in and it wasn't a nurse from the hospital. It was Blue Care. So support workers and nurses through Blue Care. So like a nurse would come, they'd ask the same questions. Is he eating? Is he drinking? Is he this? Is he that? How is he today? And it's kind of like until it gets really bad, it's the same thing. So they're like, does he need meds? Does he need pain relief? No, at this stage he was fine. And they'd leave. There was no like humaneness. It was just like quick and easy. By the time he actually needed to be medicated, which that in itself was the biggest, most hardest thing for me to do. And even past his death was probably one of the hardest things to do. I think because we did so much of it alternatively or naturally. And I think to have to give him any medication in the end was just like, I felt like I was failing, I guess. And because he wasn't responsive at this point to a degree, I felt like I couldn't say to him, what do you want, Diego? Like, what do you want? Like, we'd spoke about this, you know, we know that we didn't want to do it this way, but like, there's no other way. So I'd spoken to Hayley who was quite alternative too, but had done a lot of death. And I think being brain, they were like, it's really painful. So you had to go off his cues. So like say when you're changing his incontinence age, which I'd have to do, he'd reach out in pain. Like he'd be so unconscious, but he'd reach out in like a moan. And that's kind of like, you'd soon learn his pain tolerance that way. And I was just like, he's in pain. We can't have him in this pain. And they were like, you know, this is bad. And, you know, I just tried to take advice off Hayley as well. And I think it just got to the point where like, we're going to have to medicate him. So the nurse still comes once a day, brings out like a driver, and then all of these vials basically drops them off to you. You get this big like Bunnings box, and it's got a book, and it's like a DIY. So it's how to insert a PICC line, which is like a cannula, how to insert meds. So no one is allowed to do it but me, but yet I'm never once shown how to do it. So like in the middle of the night, his PICC line had come out, which is where you inject his morphine. And it's just a DIY piece of paper of how to put another PICC line into his body. And I had a support worker there with me who was a nurse, but she wasn't legally allowed to touch him. And it had been a while since she'd done one. So she's like, I can't, Hayley, you have to do it. So I'm sitting there trying to inject him. And we're drawing, like, I remember there was me, Hayley, and another support worker, and we're on the floor all hours of the night taking turns of injecting him and doing up like hundreds of vials of morphine. And at this point I was like, nothing's working. Like his pain, like at this point you're like trying to gauge, you know, and you also know the whole same thing, not to feed him. Hayley had showed me this documentary thing, which was about, you know, like in hospital sometimes you prolong it, or the pain or the fluids, and how things can look people tell you that death can look quite messy because you release fluids and things like this. And you soon learn too, it's also because they're being fed still. It's like if they don't want to eat and they're in that state that they're in and they're dying, you kind of have to follow that, because that switches off things within them that allows them to die peacefully. So you're enabling them to be in more pain by feeding them. You know, you're concerned of them. So I remember at the beginning I was like, he's not eating, he needs to eat. He's not drinking, he needs to drink. Like, but then it was about 7 days where he just went off everything, and I just had to like succumb to that and realize that that's a natural state of dying, and that if we mess with that, we're messing with his dying process. But palliative care don't tell you these things, or hospitals don't tell you these things. They just literally leave you with a bunch of medication that was meant to be this medication that was meant to be. I never got a lockbox. I'm drawing up vials on the floor with my 4 kids around. Like, there's no care. Like and like my gut at that point was like, the elderly out here, or the elderly anywhere. Like, not that I had support, but what about elderly that mentally can't do this? How are they doing it? Like, do they just then ship their partner to the closest hospital and just like, okay, they're dying, put them in a little ward? Like, my brain exploded.
And then they just shove as many drugs into them as possible, so to speed up the process.
Exactly. So it was a fine balance of not over-medicating him but keeping his pain at bay, because at the end of the day, that's the last thing that – it's like I had to let go of – it's not even an ego, but, you know, you just had to let go of wanting to do his death drug-free, I think. You know, like I wanted – realising that keeping him pain-free was the most important thing, but also letting the natural way take course, I guess, as well. Yeah. So it was a hard balance. And like you said, with birth, you don't get a second go at it. It's like it's so much pressure but hurt and pain and hardness around it all. But that would have been our palliative care. So if I hadn't have had Hayley, who had been around a few deaths, it would have been me on my own with my 4 kids and a DIY book. And that was the government palliative care system.
Thanks, guys.
So like when people look at me like I'm crazy for doing what I did and exposing my kids, what other option did I have? I was actually as supported as I physically could have been in that moment around someone that deals with death in a humane way. You know, people-led death rather than state-led death.
I feel like, though, when, you know, bringing it back to birth, these are things that we all have to do, and it's not going to be the last time that your children are going to witness death. And like, what is better? What I saw, which was abuse in my dad's final hours, like you couldn't label it as anything else.
Yeah.
Or is it dad lying there in our home, in the comfort of our home, surrounded by flowers.
Your kids laughing and giggling outside the room because they're kids.
Yeah, and they had that time afterwards too to continue processing.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm just like, I saw that and I was just like, why couldn't I be one of your kids?
Yeah.
It's you know, when I look at the two situations, and my story, I feel like many people would have experienced.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's like, well, what would you prefer? What's better to imprint?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, it's going to be traumatic. They're losing their dad. Yeah. Like, whether he goes in a body bag to some stranger's back car, or like in the middle of the night when they don't see it, or they witness it, but they're there for they knew he was dying. It wasn't a surprise. It wasn't like, I must admit it was hard. There was a moment there where Luna was 8 and she was in the room, and it was towards the end and he was just sleeping. So they would just lay and they'd cry. They knew it was coming. Luna knew it was coming to the point where they're so in tune that she'd never had panic attacks in her life. And out came the biggest panic attack. And it was like 3 days before he passed away. And it's like, I don't even know if you would call it a panic attack. I guess it just looked like a panic attack. But I remember even speaking to Hayley, and she's like, and you know, when you've got someone that's witnessed a few deaths, when people-led death, where it's kind of somewhat natural, you soon realize there's so many things that is not a coincidence. Like kids in a death space all seem to act and do the same things. You know, like it's like this inner knowing. It's like she knew my dad is dying. Like it's a lot, but it would have been a lot whether we were getting a funeral car to come in or not. You know, like
and I think harder to process if it's all just
he's
hidden
just
away.
taken away.
Yeah, it's like dad's here and now dad's gone, and I never and that's it's. You know,
and I'm no like professional, but I know that I can't even say where I read it, but it was about, you know, kids need to see it, smell it and feel it to be able to process it. They can't, they get that stripped from them. So for them to be able to literally smell it, feel it and witness it, it's like they can process. It's not going to be easy. It's not, you know, it's still traumatic, but they can process these things. And I think even for myself, it was, and I could see it through each one of my kids, how many days it took to like sink in and let him go was like big. It was like, I can't imagine if he had just gone when he died. You know, like it takes time. It took time for me. Like the first night was horrific, and he stayed in a bed, like in his vigil next to our bed, and we all co-slept in the same room. So we slept for 4 nights in the room that he was passed in. So he was right there with us. And like, I remember the first night I was like, can I do this? Like I actually felt not wrong, scared, weird. It was like, you still like, I don't think, maybe not everyone would have had that same experience, and I hope no one does, but to be so alone, like it was just me and the kids, and here's all we ever had. It was like our micro little circle and unit and family, and that main character is now gone, and now it's just me with my kids and him there dead. It was just like, I don't know, it just slapped me in the face when I had to go to bed, and I was like, I actually don't know if I can do this, you know, like it was a moment of like, what are you doing, you know? But I think I woke up the next morning, and that's when I decorated and like did the flowers and like made it homely, I guess. And I think within that process of like giving back to him and honoring him just made me feel comfortable. And I think it got to a point where I didn't even want him to go, and the kids didn't want him to go, you know? So you do have those ups and downs of like, this is a lot, but I can't imagine what it would have been like if he had have just disappeared out of our life the moment he stopped breathing. Like that would have been so much more traumatic than to have him there for 4 days. Like the kids would come in and chant over him in their own ways. And like I remember Inca, because he was cold. So like Inca was 3 and she would just come in with a scarf and be like, Daddy's cold, and like give it to him. Or they'd put their toys with him, or they'd say that I love you, Dad. Like there was just moments for them to just really sink into it. Like they knew he was gone. It wasn't giving them false hope. They knew, but I think it just gives you time. As if he's just gone, your brain would be just even more mush.
It's just shock.
And that's
like,
all we need, right? It's the same as birth, and we'll keep going back to birth, but that's all we need in birth too. It's just time to let things be as they're supposed to be. Yeah. And when that's taken from us, that creates that unease, and just it feels wrong.
And after both, like you're never the same again.
No.
So to speed that process up or to cut it short or whatever it is it feels criminal. You're taking away from being able to process it inwardly. I mean, like, for me, I mean, I denied it for a solid 4 months.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing to normalize, I think. I mean, like, and we've all probably travelled far enough, but I remember like going to India, and I know we're not really supposed to watch it, but, you know, like I watched them doing the ceremonies and where they burn the bodies at the guts and stuff. And like, that's just so normal, and it's not weird to be, you know, with the past.
Life. Yeah.
The dead bodies, and they're just like, you know,
it's
like
a part
it's
of, like you said, it's a part of life.
It's a really rich part of the entire life and the whole thing, and death, and it's just handled in such a way that just feels natural and normal, as opposed to be like, where does it go? Like, I feel like none of us would even really know what happens to our loved ones once
actually
they pass.
quite
They're going to the car, and then
it's actually quite scary. Like the stories and things that I've been told from people that are within it is like some big corporations, like they'll just throw their clothes on a coffin. Your person isn't even dressed. Your person isn't even bathed. Like, you're handing your person over assuming that they're going to be in their clothes, they're going to be bathed, and they're going to be handled with respect even though they're passed. Not everyone does, and that just broke my heart, because we got to bath him, we got to dress him, we got to touch him, the kids got to bath him. Like, I know that might be a lot for some people, but I think like it's so, like, it's your own power. It's like we spend all this time loving each other as a society and as humans, and, you know, some of us searching for more, searching within, healthy eating, all of the things, birthing beautifully, having these beautiful families and homes and raising our kids. And we're all got death in our future, but it's never not like even celebrated, like a ritual. Like our culture has nothing. And I remember reading a book after Diego passed, and it was about a few different countries and how big death has a culture and a community, like the wailing of streets, the mourning. We actually physically need that. Like, I think it's just taken away from us, and grief isn't even like, not only are they taken away, grief isn't even acknowledged, and especially even more so for like young families. There's absolutely nothing for like, how do you even navigate once they've passed, you know?
And it's something that really should just be part, like, we should grow up knowing that death is around us and doesn't have to be scary and hidden and hushed, and like, it can be, it's a part of our lives and something that we need to.
It definitely didn't traumatize the kids. Like, like, I think in my own experience with being so like together as a family, I think the other way would have been so much more traumatizing. Hasn't been easy, but I think for our own journey, I think it's the lead up and the cancer journey that was really hard and traumatic for the kids and for me, and for brain cancer in general is really traumatic with the personality changes. And, you know, that's the horrendous part, is like, you know, having to navigate death without having their opinion, and not being able to ask him what he wants fully. And, you know, like, that was hard.
I feel like you couldn't have done it.
I hope that he's proud. I remember waking up the next day just going, is he okay? Like, I just wanted to know that he was okay. You know, like, you've put it all together and you're like, I understand he's gone, but if I could just ask him one thing, is like, was it okay? Was he okay? You know, like.
I don't know. What you guys emulated there is, if I'm ever in that situation, I'm like, get that book out. Word for word. Because, I think, what you created for Diego and for the kids, like, it was really beautiful.
For all of us. Like, I think, and it was just us, you know, the flowers and the candles, and it was just intimate, and it was just us. I do look back and think, have I grieved properly because I haven't had a funeral, you know, like.
Yeah.
But I think that's more not a funeral, it's mourning. Time to grieve. Like, how do you have time to grieve when he passed the next morning? It's, Mum, I'm hungry. Like, they're kids. They bounce back and forth like that. So I'm like barely wanting to get up in the morning, but they're like, Mum, I'm hungry. I want food. I want breakfast, lunch and dinner. And there's no one there to get it, but I've got to get up and get them breakfast, lunch and dinner.
Which is like, in a sick way, almost a blessing.
Yeah. Like, well, it kind of, I guess, gets you out of your head to a degree, because you've just got to keep charging because it doesn't stop. But Yeah, it's a lot.
Wow.
It's huge, man.
But I do think more people, like you said, a lot of people thought it was illegal. They were like, what are you doing? And like, obviously I was lighting a lot of fires after he'd passed in the garden, and obviously I was probably documenting that. And I think for me, that was just grounding. I needed that fire. I just laid horizontal on the grass when I had moments, and I just lay, because I still wasn't feeling well within myself, but you just push through. So like I remember just laying by the fire, and I think just that warmth, just, I don't know, I just did it every day. And I think people were like, are you burning him? Like, what are you, like I had really
Piece by piece, like what
really
is going
random
on?
and I get it, because like you don't see the whole picture. So like it probably was really confusing, but no, I think the fire and the burning was for me, and it was just the warmth, the sun, the fire. I don't know. Like I'm on my own out there. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm seeing nobody. You know, when someone dies, normally you have people that come, and I didn't see a soul, you know, and I didn't get the aftercare that I thought I'd booked. I didn't get any doula care, if you want to call it that. He died, everyone left. The minute he died, support workers leave, everyone leaves, your house is empty, and it's just us. So like that I think needs to change too. Like I think something needs to change around death, because not everyone has a beautiful family that can come and take the kids away for an ice cream and come and hold you and just cry with you and tell you it's okay.
But also like birth, a lot of us have families who don't have that reverence for birth. So we need to hire doulas. We need to hire like
outsource, right?
Outsource for the people who actually see and have the same visions as we do.
100%.
So yeah, I feel that.
Because I get that too. Like some people have the family, but it's even more messy.
Exactly.
Like it's like
dysfunctional, and sometimes their views are like really warped and not what you would want.
Yeah.
But you still need something.
It's like the death space is messy for all reasons, isn't it? Like whether you have family or no family, whether it's financial, like whatever, death is just messy, and I don't think it should have to be.
And I think scary for anyone who hasn't experienced it.
It's definitely scary. It was like I've always been scared of cancer and death my whole life, and I think people are shocked when they hear that because of the way that I did it. But I think it just all intuitively just fell into place. But it was very winged, you know, like it really was.
Wow, it's very inspiring.
Yeah, I think that's all we have time for, Hayley.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us and with our audience.
I hope it helps. If it helps someone, you know, like it's helped people see that they can do it a different way, and they can do it. It can be beautiful, and it's legal, and you can do it. There's you just need more people doing it.
Even when you said backyard burial, I was like, you can bury a body in your backyard.
You can. You really can. It can be beautiful. Like you really can. You own your land. It has to be a certain size, and there is like, and I think each state is a little bit different, but it's definitely doable. You don't have to call an ambulance right away. You don't have to do it the traditional way. There's, you know, you can. You really, and even without hiring somebody, you can. You can even get them just direct cremated. So Diego was cremated, and it's just, you can do these things on your own. You really can.
That's so incredible.
It's like free birth, but free death.
Exactly. Exactly.
Can we? Free death.
We're coining it, free death.
Man, you're incredible. You are so incredible, and I applaud everything that you've done, and that I would, and I hope that I exhibit as much grace if I'm ever put in the position.
You will.
Oh,
you would.
Big. I haven't, so got something there. We're learning.
Round 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. God. Yeah. But no, if anyone wanted to reach out to you to find out more, where could they find you?
I think like social media is the best. Like Instagram is the best, which is just Hadazamore, I guess, on Instagram. I mean, I documented a lot of it, but I'm always there for questions. I have had a fair few people reach out, especially in the process.
Yeah.
Because I think I didn't realize how big it would be and how many people need it.
Yeah.
Makes sense now. I mean, there's going to be someone that's needing it probably every day, realistically, but I'm just happy to share it and happy that people know that there's another option.
And you're back on the tools too, which is beautiful.
Yes.
Doing some more photography.
I need to get back out. It's time.
Yeah.
It's time to do something for me, I think.
So guys, if you're on the Sunshine Coast and looking for a photographer, Hayley is fucking incredible. I have photographic evidence.
Just give me all the nude bodies. But no, like I miss it. I need that creative outlet.
Yeah. Oh, thank you again, Hayley.
Thank you.
Really incredible.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Road to Wisdom podcast. To join the journey, you can follow us on Instagram at theroadtowisdom.podcast and at www.theroadtowisdompodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We look forward to seeing you next week with more juicy content.